Justin here. I'm back. Just got a quick video tonight. I'm going to talk about going to see Slayer the other day. I am just coincidentally wearing a Slayer shirt. I did not buy this at the show. This is a Mexican bootleg. Mexican bootlegs are the best that I've had for a few months. Well, backstory. I think that Divine Intervention is awesome. I bought it when it came out, and it was not my introduction to Slayer, but it was very close. I've always liked it. I've had a soft spot for it. It's one of the earliest Slayer recordings I ever got. You know, it's a dark record. It's real dark. It's good. It has a few songs, and they still play a couple of them live. But anyway, before we get into Slayer, we're listening to Necro-Wretch, Rising from Purulence. So here's something interesting. I just grabbed this off the shelf the other day, just completely randomly. Said I want to listen to something that I don't know. And I've had this tape forever. This came out on Skeleton Plague Productions, which is a tiny tape label 10 years ago. And I used to do trades with them. And this is, if you can hear, and I'll put a link to it below, it's just thrashy black death metal. It's really good. It's competent. It's really engaging. Like, I like it. There's lots of good riffs. So I looked them up, and this band ended up signing to Century Media, and they put out a record on Century Media, and they've since put out a record on Seasons of Mist. They have 3 or 4 full lengths, but their bass player now is the bass player from Hyperdontia, who I fucking love. They are my absolute favorite of all these new jack death metal bands, playing obscure, nasty, you know, abysmal sounding death metal. Anyway, so that's just kind of odd that I like Hyperdontia and I pick up this random tape and they share members. But this is all I have by Necro-Wretch. I will have to check out more because apparently they've done a lot. Anyway, Slayer. I haven't talked about Slayer a lot in my videos. We haven't gotten to Slayer in the CD collection yet. But man, I mean, Slayer is one of my favorite bands of all time. And they were definitely one of those, like, gateway bands when I was getting into metal that helped me transition into more extreme stuff. But anyway, they played here in Atlanta a few nights ago, and I wasn't going to go. I had no intention of going. And a couple of people started hitting me up, you know, who's going to Slayer tonight? I was like, I don't know. It was at an outdoor amphitheater, and I assumed it would be a lot of money, which I don't have right now. And I don't have 40, 50, whatever it is to blow on going to see a band like that. And I was going to have to work the next day. It was on Friday night, but I had to work Saturday morning, and I wasn't going to go. And I certainly had no intention of caring about seeing the other bands. But it finally all kind of came to a head. Myke Seatown texted me and asked me if I was going, and I was like, I don't think so. I'm not planning on it. I've got to work. My wife doesn't want me to go. I don't have any money. Well, so some other people on Facebook had been mentioning going, and shout out to Myke and Rafe from the band Withered, because they were both like, you need to go. I looked up tickets, and I bought a ticket for $5. I don't know what the deal was, and I bought it from the venue's website. $5, no fees, no nothing. $5 ticket for like general admission. The Lakewood Amphitheater here in Atlanta has a big lawn, so you have like the covered amphitheater, and then you have just a grassy hill, and you can sit or stand or whatever on this grassy hill, and no matter where you're at, you can see the bands playing, and you can certainly fucking hear them, which I'll talk about in a second. So I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna buy a ticket. It's $5. It's only like a 15-minute drive from my work, so I had my wife. I called her. I was like, hey, I'm going to go see Slayer tonight. I need you to bring me some clothes to change into. I wear a suit and tie to work, so I'm certainly not going to see Slayer wearing a suit and tie. So she just happened to be off work that day, and she brought me some clothes, and I left work and went to see Slayer. So, the show started at 5, and I mean, I didn't even leave work until then, but it started at 5. There's a curfew since it's an outdoor venue, and there's residential stuff around. The show had to be over by 11 o'clock. So I get there, I park. Parking cost me $20. Parking at the venue, at the amphitheater, was $40. But I parked in a private lot about a quarter mile away for $20. Which, I mean, still, the show only cost me $5, $25 to park, whatever. I walk in, I hook up with Myke, and we hang out and we start watching the bands. Now, Napalm Death opened. I missed Napalm Death. I'm not a huge Napalm Death fan. I always listen to them sporadically. The only Napalm Death material I own is the split with Coalesce. And I really like that material because I listened to it so much. I've listened to that split so much when it came out. I was a big, we'll talk about Coalesce, I'm a big Coalesce fan. But I'm not a big Napalm Death fan. And I saw them 5 or 6 years ago, and they were really sloppy and shitty sounding. And I'm not a big fan. So, especially not on a big outdoor amphitheater stage. I think that Napalm Death in an intimate setting, like in a basement with no stage, playing a floor show, would be sick. It's funny, I made a post about not seeing them and not caring about them. And I got into a discussion with some guys on Facebook about Napalm Death, so I pulled up some stuff on YouTube, and I listened to Napalm Death for like half an hour the other day, and enjoyed it. So, I don't know, man. Anyway, when I walked in and hooked up with Myke, Testament was playing. And I've talked about thrash before. I'm not a big thrash guy, but I do like Testament. I'm a total Fairweather fan when it comes to Testament. I know a little bit of their material. But they were good. They sounded tight. They sounded energetic. Chuck Billy was really, getting the crowd riled up. They were killer. But it was also 95 degrees outside in the bright-ass fucking sun watching them. And I think I caught about half their set. But the first thing I noticed about Lakewood Amphitheater, is that it was just so incredibly fucking loud. Everything was just pushed to the max. It was all bass and kick drums. The guitars were just awash in the mix. It was loud. It was way too fucking loud and just thunderous sounding. But when you got out of the venue and out into like the food court area and then out in the parking lot, it sounded a lot clearer because all the treble and the mids were pushing through. But all you could hear in the amphitheater was fucking bass. Anyway, we watched Testament. While Testament is playing, me and Myke had the pleasure of watching some drunk guy walk up and vomit everywhere in front of us. So here's a sidebar. I drink. I like to drink. I like to have a good time. But when you go to a show and you are fucked up beyond recognition before it's dark, you've got a fucking problem, man. Get your life in check. Don't get so far gone that you have to fucking vomit on the fucking sidewalk in front of everybody and you don't know what's fucking happening. Shit's fucking pathetic and gross. Anyway, Anthrax was up next. I'm not an Anthrax fan. I've never been an Anthrax fan. They're boring as fuck. I just don't, they don't do it for me. Maybe their first record. Their first record's alright. I'm not going to buy it. If I find it in a used record store for a couple bucks, I'll buy it. Someone gives it to me, I'll listen to it. I'm just not a big Anthrax fan. And the sound was terrible at this place anyway, so I'm watching a band I don't really care for with terrible sound in a shitty venue. And it just wasn't, it was whatever. Now, I can say, hey, I've seen Anthrax. Nah, I got a lot of respect for Anthrax. They've been around forever, and they're consistent. And I could make a joke and say, well, they're consistently shitty, but they're not shitty. They're just not my thing. You know, I paid $5 to see him, man. It was fun. So, and I know there's a lot of people out there who fucking love Anthrax, and maybe I just need to spend some quality time listening to them. I don't know. I used to have Sirius radio in my truck, and the hard rock station would play Indians like once a fucking hour. And I just, man, had enough of it. So, anyway, before we get on to the next band, I changed the tape because I listened to both sides of Necro-Wretch, and now we're listening to Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime. I'm not going to get into talking about Queensryche. Just fucking bear with me. So then, after Anthrax, Darkness Has Fallen, and Lamb of God comes on. So, it was evident that a large part of the draw this night was Lamb of God. There were so many people there going apeshit over Lamb of God. And that's another band that, like, I have followed them from... I remember when they were Burn the Priest, and there was no Lamb of God, and I never listened to them. I found out, I read about them somewhere right around the time they made the change. And they just never clicked with me. And it's weird that they didn't, because I'm that same kind of... I'm this southern kid who likes metal, but's also kind of a redneck. And that's exactly what they cater to. And, you know, Lamb of God might have been good when it was just 5 guys busting their ass to play metal in sweaty clubs and in people's basements. But seeing them on a giant stage with all their props and their fucking backdrops and their banners and they're putting on a performance. Randy Blythe, you gotta say it right, he's a performer, he's a character up there, and he sounds like a wrestling announcer trying to rile the crowd up, and it just, man, it doesn't do it for me. I'm sure that they're fun guys to hang out with, and I watched their documentary, the As the Palaces Burn documentary I've seen it twice, I watched it twice, and I enjoyed it. It's a look at a band who went through some shit, and I can appreciate that, but they're not my thing. And I've got some friends who, like, they're a total guilty pleasure, and they don't do it for me. And live, they didn't do it for me. Now, were they a little more enjoyable than Anthrax and Testament? Yeah. You know, they're like Redneck at the Gates a little bit. So, I'm gonna turn it down. They're like Redneck at the Gates a little bit, but, you know, they only played 7 songs. 9 songs. It was, you know, it was over and done with. But Lakewood holds 15, 17,000 people, and there was a good, like, 14 or 15 there. It wasn't packed, but it was full. And 90% of them were just fucking wretched white trash. And a lot of them were there for Lamb of God. So, during Lamb of God, me and Myke went and ate some dinner. I paid $19.75 for a cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke. And I was just kind of like, I went straight from work. I was fucking starving. I wasn't going to wait until midnight or whatever when I leave, and I had to eat. So my $5 show turned into me spending $50 basically. But still, I mean, it'll cost you that much right now for, you know, fucking Cannibal Corpse tickets. So, anyway, it's the witching hour. It's time. Slayer's on. They were going on at 9:20, which was nice because it wasn't going to be super late. They were going to play for an hour and a half and be done at 11. And now, I've seen Slayer twice. I saw Slayer on Halloween night, 2001, and I saw them on August the 30th, 2002. So it's been 16 years since I've seen Slayer. The first time I saw them was with Paul Bostaph, and the second time I saw them was with the original lineup. And both times they were great. Both times I saw them, it was heavy on God Hates Us All material, but they played all the classics that I wanted to hear. And they were excellent. Now, that was 16, 17 years ago, I didn't analyze music the way that I do now. And it's a blessing and a curse. But the first thing I noticed when Slayer started playing the other night, and Michael backed me up on this, is that they were kind of fucking sloppy. They were sloppy and tired. And a lot of it was the mix, was the sound. Now, they sounded better than every other band that night. They sounded restrained a little bit. Like, they said, all right, let's turn this shit back a little bit because we're blowing everybody's fucking eardrums out. So they were a little lower in the volume. And they were a little, you know, restrained sounding. But it was still all kick drums and bass. And the guitars, you couldn't make them out. Now, I'm also watching them from a couple hundred yards back because I am too old to be down there in the middle of everybody. So I stood up on my fucking old man hill and I watched Slayer. Set went on, I was like, it's not pumping me up. It's not getting me there. It's not the Slayer I want to see. Now, luckily, I got to see Slayer before, man, and you know, I always have that. I saw them when I'd been into them for, you know, 6 or 7 years, and it was one of these just watershed moments for me in my metal journey. Now, I'm glad that I got to see them on their final tour, and I'll always have that. And Slayer will always be one of my favorite bands of all time. Today, I was home from work, and I listened to Show No Mercy, and I listened to Hell Awaits, and I listened to Rain and Blood on vinyl back to back to back. I love Slayer. I love Slayer so much. But I've seen them better, and I've heard some other people say that they've seen them better than they're playing lately. And again, a lot of it was just the sound at Lakewood. As the night went on, I was exhausted. I had worked all day. I had been on my feet all night. And after about an hour, I bowed out. I left during Seasons in the Abyss. Another thing is, in the clean part, in the beginning of Seasons in the Abyss, Carrie is playing his guitar straight into his Marshall clean. There are no effects. There's no chorus. There's no delay. There's no reverb. There's no nothing. And his guitar sounded like a fucking banjo. And it was fucking terrible, and I hated it. And it turned me off. So as I'm leaving, I get out of the parking lot, and as I'm walking out, I hear, you know, a good song or two on my walk back to the car. And they sounded so much better away from the amphitheater. But whatever. Slayer rules. They're always going to rule. Say what you want to. Say what you want about Jeff dying and Gary being in the band. Say what you want to about Carrie being Carrie and Tom being a Christian, apparently. But Slayer created something that we all owe a debt to. And without Slayer's existence, I mean, we wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be playing death metal. I wouldn't be making these videos and talking about all these bands, because every single band on these shelves owe a debt to Slayer. So, farewell, Slayer. I love you, and let's talk about them. I'll talk to you guys later.